4.3, it's basically talking about that section of your agenda where the council has, and the mayor both have opportunity for comments. And it talks about how a council member can bring up an item that they feel should be deliberated upon by the council, that they don't need to be listed on the agenda, and that really no formal action would be taken. But then it says, except that immediate action may be taken upon a vote of a majority of all the members of the council. There's a little caution there around, very specific, there should be no lectures, speeches, or grandstanding. So the idea there, I guess, is around doing the city's business during the comments time. But I think what I wanted to bring up specifically is this issue of except that immediate action may be taken upon a vote of a majority of all members of the council. That's kind of a general statement that if there was something that wasn't legislative, something pretty minor, but it took your vote to kind of move it forward, you could probably do that even though it wasn't on the agenda. But certainly 4.2 being specific, that no legislative item, and certainly the statute. So the intent of 4.3 is that if there's something that you need to discuss, you bring it up, and like, hey, I think we ought to have a resolution come forward. There's some deliberation, it looks like maybe a vote would be in order to decide whether even the resolution would come forward. You could dispose of that question under 4.3. It's not really legislative because the resolution would come at a subsequent meeting. Talked to Don about that. He didn't think we needed to take it out, that it gave you some opportunity to do something if you needed to. On the next section, consensus and motions is the title of section 5. In 5.1, I'm proposing that we actually delete this from your rules, consensus votes. And as we read that, it says when a formal motion is not required on a council action or opinion. So you don't have to make a motion, which tells me you don't need to vote. It says you'll vote. So when you don't need a motion, the chair will state the action or opinion, and each council member will vote by saying aye or nay. I just don't know when that would come up where you would actually call for votes if there's no motion. So I'm not sure, unless anyone can remember what that's for.
Might that be for resolutions?
Well, there's a specific motion to approve the resolution.
To read it.
In this consensus and motions, Paul has started, and I've heard several others. Would you state how you say that? We don't get a second, but it's...
I ask unanimous consent that the accounts payable as described be approved.
Should that be described in here under that?
You could do that if you wanted to. It's in Robert's rules.
That's in Robert's rules.
Okay. We just have never done that in the past, and so that
I don't know what 5.1 would be.
Don didn't know either. I queried him.
Misspelled and it means something else.
Yeah, he suggested that you remove it, that it really looks superfluous.
Two questions, if I may. On 4.2, does this preclude bringing forward for a vote resolutions which haven't been through the workshop process?
It would depend on what was in the resolution. I think the operative term here is legislative, a legislative item. If it was a legislative item, you wouldn't be precluded from bringing it up, but it couldn't be decided
At that meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Second question on 4.3, no lecture, speeches, or grandstanding. Can you give me some feel for what we're talking about here?
Well, that's a tricky one. What could be an example of that? Not understanding the intent of the council when this was put in, but I could imagine potentially during election season that you've got someone running for re-election to the council or for re-election as mayor would take the opportunity to make a campaign speech. Potentially, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but that might be one item that you were trying to preclude. Lectures, there should be no lectures. Boy, how do comments cross into a lecture? I guess it would
And-
be a council member trying to assert a certain position forcefully to others and, taking too long to do it maybe.
I think this is really subjective, because, I mean, it's a matter of, the eye of the beholder. I mean, what one person considers grandstanding is another person's passion. So I would highly recommend that we strike that last sentence out of there.
I agree with you, John, but should we have something that simply states that you don't have a position here at a council meeting to run for reelection from
Right.
that dais?
There are certain things that can be said and cannot be said behind the dais. And that's already governed by public disclosure law. It's already governed by just ethics. You just don't, you don't get up there and say, vote for me. I mean, you don't get up there and say, vote for me and I'll do this. Or, I mean, there's just things you don't say behind the dais. And I think when you get to starting to assign judgment to people's words and what they're saying or trying to say, and say, oh, well, that's just grandstanding. Well, that's your opinion. You don't know that for a fact. And so I think that that's really an area we may want to look at striking.
Can always leave it in and I can decide. If you guys don't like what I decide, you can overrule it though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's a basis of a point of order.
Well, it's awfully similar, I don't want to break off any questions, awfully similar to somebody from the public that wants to get up and say something that's inappropriate. I'm sure gonna cut them off,
Mhm.
so. Dave?
I'd much rather strike that wording and put my faith in your ability to run the meeting.
Without having that in there though, you take away possibly some ability to control the meeting.
The chair's authority is pretty well spelled out in Robert's Rules of Order. And I think you'd get the support of the council
If
for
you-
any decision that you made in that regard.
If you look at 3.3, preservation of order is one of the responsibilities of the chair. It talks about the chair shall preserve order and decorum. Kind of personal attacks are to be prevented, and that debate should be the question under discussion. That may or may not apply to the section that this is referring to of your agenda, which is
Comments, right.
the general comments, where often it's, reporting on community events but for example, bringing up the 9/11 resolution the other night was done under that section of the agenda. So sometimes items of substance come up during the comments. But there is general, absolutely, there's general order that is to be kept by the chair, and the chair could call anything out of order, I suppose, subject to the challenge of the council.
I think that power is pretty limited under a comment period. That would be my concern.
I try and, as you've noticed, I try and keep that pretty liberal.
Yeah, but without something, I don't think you have a rule to stand on. That I think Robert's Rules is pretty much wide open on comments
Or I can always come up with something.
or statements of